Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
John, once again, I will say, and I've said this many times before, and I know I'm going to get pushback from people, I find Mark McCloskey a fascinating guy. And what's interesting about it is, I call him, you know how this whole crazy thing started? Did I ever tell you this crazy story about how...
Remind us. I don't remember the story, but remind us.
One day we were talking about, this is going back to our old show, the BS show with me and Shelley, Brad and Shelley, bs.show. And we were talking about, I don't know, something to do with, as we referred to, and a lot of people have called him Pinky and Stripes, because the infamous day when the people invaded his place in the Central West End, he was wearing a pink polo shirt and his wife had a black and white striped shirt on. Okay, so they became Pinky and Stripes. And we were just talking about the whole situation with Mark McCloskey and his wife, and also, and we were actually talking about some of the goofy things that come out, but some of the things that people were saying about him and how he's started being persecuted by Kim Gardner. And I said to her, I wonder if there's contact information on his website, because I think at the time he was contemplating running for Senate, hadn't really gone into that yet. I can't remember what the circumstances were. So I go on his website, and there's a phone number. Now, John, let's be honest. You know this from being a comms guy. Most time you go on a website, there's no phone numbers, there's no email address, there's a contact form, correct? And
that's absolutely correct.
And you go on the contact form and you fill it out and you hope that somebody replies, maybe within a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month, okay? Well, on his website, there is no contact form. There is no email address. There's a phone number. So I took the phone, put it live on the air, dialed the number, and Mark answered. It was his cell phone number. And I'm going like, I almost don't believe this is happening, because once again, if you and I decided, hey, let's say we picked a target. Let's say we picked Josh Hawley, and you and I had a bet, $100. The first person to get Josh Hawley on the phone wins $100. If we don't get him on the phone within that day, nobody makes the bets off, okay? You and I would probably not end up owing any money to either other, because we would never get Josh Hawley on the phone, correct?
I think it would be a challenge, yeah, for sure.
But don't you agree that it would be almost impossible to get somebody like him on the phone?
No, I don't think so at all. I think we could get him on the phone today.
Do you really?
I see your point. I think if we're Joe Sixpack, I think it would be a challenge to get him on the phone.
Well,
for sure.
See, you have a better chance. I'm like a nobody. You're John Combest. You're like
it's not. It's not about that. But your point's taken, Brett.
Matter of fact, when I was in Jefferson City last week, I think I saw you there. But was I?
All I do is hang around the Capitol. I'm like, hey, if anybody needs me, right. I'm like one of the ex-legislators that's not really a very good lobbyist, but just kind of comes around, hopes people remember him. I used to be a state senator.
I was going to say, matter of fact, I took a wrong turn in Jefferson City, and I ended up in John Combest Drive. I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, he's got a street name for him in Jefferson City.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what. If I have one thing, Brad, it's a strong drive. Now, what story did you expect to be number one, Brad?
The Bill Eigel letter where he's saying we need to reconvene the convention.
Oh, yeah, boy, I tell you what. Now, Brad, the convention fallout story did not make my top 3 today. There are a number of them, and here's just a few that I'll point out real quick. Austin Peterson, formerly of KWOS, who now has a fantastic show called Wake Up America. He had Americans for Prosperity's Camelia Peterson on yesterday. She gave her view. She called her view, Brad, mostly objective. She said she had a mostly objective view of what happened. So she has her view. A guy named Ben Baker has his view. A number of people are weighing in. Now, here's my prediction on this, Brad. we're at the point, when you watch a football game and somebody's going, it's fourth down, somebody's going, and there's a big scrum, and then some little pipsqueaks jump in over the top after the tackle's already been made. You ever see that, Brad?
Oh, yeah.
So here's what I think is going to happen. I think starting today, people who weren't even there, but who think there's some sort of benefit and then weighing in on what happened at a state convention they didn't even attend, but they're like, ooh, one group of people's mad and I need some votes, so I'm going to choose sides and be on that team. I think you're going to see a bunch of schlubs, a bunch of pipsqueaks, a bunch of dork chops start weighing in on this, whatever you want to call them, to try to make a little bit of political hay. If you're a candidate and you don't have much else to talk about, just talk about the state convention.
So are you essentially broad brushing Bill Eigel into that category?
No, absolutely not, Brad, because first of all, excuse me, Bill made his statement the other day. Bill and his team have been involved in this Sophie Shore is Bill's campaign manager, and she was elected chair. I'm clearly not talking about a Bill Eigel or a Ben Baker, or Aaron Baker was on Scott Fawn's show yesterday talking about it. Aaron Baker is a brilliant political mind. He weighed in on this yesterday. I'm not talking about those guys, Brad. I'm talking about nothing happening candidates that need votes, that will feel the need to weigh in. And as a reminder for political people or non-political people, you don't have to have an opinion on everything.
Okay, and to recap what happened or what didn't happen, the Republican convention in Springfield on Saturday turned into a little bit of a sort of a mixed-up mess where there were delays in getting everybody signed in and give everybody a head count and the whole bit. And long story made short, it had a mandatory cutoff time of 8 o'clock on Saturday night. Wasn't that the deal?
That's correct. A hard stop.
8 o'clock on Saturday night. And on Saturday night at 8 o'clock, when they had to stop it, the agenda was not complete, and there were things that they never got to, and there were people complaining about that. And it just turned in sort of a mess. So, I mean, at one point in time, didn't I read something that had some sophisticated computer system where they were going to check in all the delegates and the whole bit, and they ended up doing it by hand, by paper or something like that because the computer system crashed? What is this, Iowa in the caucus or something like this?
Yeah, here's what I like about Bill Eigel coming out with a statement on this. It's a way for, and I'm sure, and I read what Bill had to say about this, and I mean, there's substance behind it, but it's also just another way to remind people, P.S., our side won, just as a reminder, our side won, our team won.
And that's
so if you're a Bill Eigel supporter, you like that.
Right, and that's Bill Eigel saying our team won, essentially, because his campaign manager is the new chairwoman or whatever she is, right?
She was elected chair of the convention, yeah, and it essentially means that folks who, and it's a big honor to be a delegate to the Republican National Convention. They're activists that spend their whole life and wait till they start to get a little bit of gray hair before they're finally recognized and get a chance to be a delegate at the Republican National Convention. It's quite an honor. So, it's a big deal to be a delegate, Brad. And if your side or your team, whatever you want to call it, wins those delegates, it's a pretty cool thing to be able to deliver.
See, I've never had to wait for gray hair. I could just go to Hans and say, "Okay, Hans, this week make me black-headed, and okay, next week I'm gonna go with gray hair." I could just choose whatever color I want, and
we
I do.
had a Hans Wyman reference on bjshow.co yesterday. For folks who don't know, Brad writes the original summary on bjshow.co, and Brad, I will remind you that Hans Wyman has two N's in Wyman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But Hans Wyman, I wonder, is Hans Wyman still around?
I believe he has passed on to the great hairpiece in the sky. But I'm
we have a listener, Brad, who, and I won't out this person, but they once texted me and asked if you actually have a toupee. I swear on my mother.
Do you want to hear the story of how that happened to me in my own family? Okay, this whole thing started years ago when I had an advertiser on my traffic network who was an incredibly good advertiser, and they got really good results from working with us, and it was a great relationship. The guys couldn't be nicer, and it's called Apollo Hair Systems, and they were out right there at Page and Schutz. Matter of fact, they had a sign, and it said Apollo Hair Systems, and their phone number was, I can still remember it, 314-991-HAIR, HAIR, okay? And they did a lot of advertising on the station, okay? My brother, who, shall we say, is follically challenged, lost all his hair by the time he was like 26, 27, 28. So he just did, matter of fact, when he still had hair, he would laugh about the fact that he'd go to the barber and he'd say, number 1 on the sides, number 2 on the top. If you know what I'm talking about, if you use like a wall clipper, it has the little guides that, and a number 1 is like, I think like a 16th of an inch, and I think a number 2 is
on your beard. You use a number 1 on your beard.
Right, and number 2 is like an 1/8 of an inch or something like that, and you just go, and the hair's gone. Okay, so then he just got tired of that and just totally went with, the chrome dome look where he just shaved his head. Okay, so I would run into people all the time, and they would say, hey, I saw your brother. Boy, you got hair and he doesn't. And I'd always say, oh, no, I don't have hair either. I use Apollo hair systems. So it got to be a running joke that I wore a toupee. So maybe, I don't know how many years ago this was. One day my wife calls me up and she is laughing her head off. She can hardly talk. She's laughing so hard. And I go, what's so funny? And she says, you're not going to believe what your daughter asked me this morning. And she said, I go, okay, tell me. She says, she wanted to know how long you've been bald, because she really did think I was totally bald and I wore a toupee. And she would tell her friends that I was like my brother, but unlike my brother just essentially, was bald and proud, and me, I was vain and would not show my bare head. And I had and then Apollo Hair Systems went out of business, so I switched over to, I think they're out of business. I don't think they're there anymore. Matter of fact, I'm almost positive they're not around anymore. But I just switched over to Hans Wyman. So that's my Hans Wyman joke. Now
there you go. It holds up really well, because in the rain, you could be out at a cold Missouri Freedom Caucus event, and the wind is blowing and it doesn't come off.
So through the years, and it hasn't happened in the last couple of years, but through the years, every once in a while, I'll meet someone who maybe I've spoken with on the phone or who's a listener to the station and stuff like that. The last time this happened, I had a woman who kept looking very closely, and I can tell her eyes were not meeting my eyes. We're not making eye contact. I was making eye contact with her eyes, and her eyes were looking at my forehead and my head. And finally, I said to her, what are you looking at? And she goes, I'm trying to make sense of the fact that I don't think you do have a hairpiece. Because she's looking at my hairline to see if it, some of them are really good. And by the way, some of the Hans Wyman, even the Apollo Hair Systems ones. Matter of fact, one of the guys who was one of the sales guys for Apollo Hair Systems, you would never have guessed he had a hairpiece. It was that good. I mean, it was, and he had like back in the day. This was back in the early '90s. He had a mullet. He had like a mullet kind of hairdo, which was fake. And it looked damn good. I mean, it looked scary good. You know what I'm saying? How do we talk about that?
Isn't it a little vain? I don't know. I mean, I guess everybody's different. But if you're losing your hair, shouldn't you just let it go?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a personal preference kind of thing. For women, I
get it.
There's a lot of women who, for some reason, one or the other, some of them medical, some of them, just weird stuff happens to them where they lose their hair. For women, it could be very, very traumatic.
I'm talking about men. I'm not talking about women.
Same thing with men. Something, see, the interesting thing is over the last 20 years, the chrome dome look has taken on, you got like the, the Rock, and you got all these, wasn't Stone Cold Steve Austin, wasn't he like a chrome dome dude?
Yeah, he was, because he was thinning back when he was stunning Steve Austin. He grew out that long flowing blonde hair, but it was thinning up in front.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
he shaved it.
But see, here's the interesting thing. We go again now where we go through this juxtaposition of it's once upon a time during my lifetime, all the heroes, all the guys, the Sylvester Stallones and the Arnold Schwarzeneggers were all the tough He-Man kind of guys. Now all the stars are the Ryan Reynolds and the Ryan Goslings and
don't get me started on that.
And oh my God, where's my avocado toast at? And
can you believe people eating avocado toast? Like, how low is your testosterone? They should just call McCloskey. They should get hooked up with his doctor and they'll fix everything. And you know what else fixes everything, Brad? The next governor of the state of Missouri. And the next governor of the state of Missouri, we're going to have some quotes from him in our next segment.
Okay.
741.
Boy, you're ahead of me. Okay, say it again.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?